It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and your host, Chris Larry.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business on the Hogstye Network, the show where we look at the dollars and the cents of the sports media business industrial complex and all of its global glory. How you doing today, Steve?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How is everything? How's everything in the nonprofit world?
Uh, same old, same old. Yeah, things get tricky in the nonprofit world. So
It's actually a very complex universe.
it is actually quite complex, no matter how you slice and dice it, whether you from a tax, because really most people, I might have even said this before in the show, but most people don't realize is all nonprofit is really just a tax delineation within how the government sees different kinds of entities and then, what kind of tax or tax breaks they get from that. So now a lot of people fill in the blanks that it's this sort of like do-gooders and, save the world and all that. And of course, that's all of a part of it. But really, nonprofits is the thing about that is it's much more a business, government, tax category than it is a mindset.
Well, yeah, I actually agree with that because I do deal with them occasionally in real estate. Because some of these land deals, they will be put in the name of a nonprofit, for property tax purposes, and then leased back to the real developer who can actually do all this work. And sometimes there's a lot of these deals have, you know, tax credits and flowing through nonprofit stuff. It gets really complicated. And it is a tax thing, not a do-gooder thing in my world.
Yeah. Now it's the framework. At least half the intent of the framework is in place so that the do-gooder parts exist.
Oh,
But
there's definitely that. But in my world,
yeah,
it's less do-gooder, more tax. In your world, it may be more do-gooders. I don't know.
well, yeah, of course it is. But like even but you're still ruled by the same laws
Yes.
and rules. And then even within that, there's like various versions of nonprofits, even subversions underneath that tax status. As well. So it's actually quite interesting. Actually,
But
nonprofit law in terms of helping nonprofits manage this is actually a pretty vibrant business.
yes, none of that is important compared to the most important thing that happened in the past two. We had to skip a week mainly because there were running good stories. But in the past 3 weeks, there was one very, very big story that I want to bring up here before we even delve into the sports stories. And that is the fact that Twisted Sister has been resurrected with Sebastian Bach as a lead singer. Have you seen this?
No, so I've been following. I don't know how I feel about that, but I was following the Twisted Sister dramas, and it sounds like D. Schneider's not doing too good, so it's not that's sort
I
of
heard it.
sad.
I listened to an interview with Sebastian Bach. For those of you who don't know, is a former lead singer of Skid Row, and they hate him. The Skid Row people absolutely hate him now, and so they won't bring him back to Skid Row. But I listened to an interview with Bach, who said that D. Snyder's health problems stems from his knees, and he can't perform on stage like he wanted to, and so, but he's not in like life-threatening danger.
Right,
Apparently,
it's not
according
like
to Sebastian Bach.
so I was following the like they're getting back together, they're doing a tour, then canceled tour, D. Snyder health, and then that's where this I lost the thread. So I didn't know about the Sebastian
Well,
Bach,
see, the
Bach
ironic
element.
thing is that Snyder wrote every single Twisted Sister song.
Yeah,
Oh,
he is Twisted Sister.
I mean, he's not. There were 3 or 4 of them that formed the band originally. It's not like he is Twisted Sister in the same way that Ronnie James Dio was Dio, but he is the music for sure. And so the idea of having someone else up there doing Twisted Sister songs is a bit weird, but I do think Bach may be one of the only ones who could get up there and do it and not make it a total mockery.
Yeah, that actually is interesting casting, and that's exactly what I'll call it. So that would be interesting. So what kind of venues are they going to play?
Right now, it's the interview I heard. It was with Eddie Trunk on Sirius, and they said, and it was actually Bach and two of the old Twisted Sister members, and they said right now they only have like 6 shows scheduled and so they're going to see how it goes and then schedule more. So the venues, I'm not sure. It's I want to say the theater, I think, but I'm not sure. I definitely don't think Twisted Sister was never big enough to be in an arena at all.
No, I
Like
wouldn't. Even in the, whatever,
in the heyday,
1985.
no,
Yeah,
they were never an arena band, or if they were, they would have been an opening act. So I would assume arena theaters, I would guess.
I do love Twisted Sister and Dee Schneider. But Twisted, do, do you, there's one, so more my world, but proto, especially NYC punk 68 to 74, let's call it, share some DNA with Twisted Sister. The band The
Mhm.
Dictators uh, shared a bassist, Mark the Animal Mendoza, who was the
Oh,
bass player in Twisted Sister,
yeah.
was in the a version, I think, on the second album, Manifest Destiny, of the Dictators, and then has another, the Dictators, who were really more like kind of like muscular, kind of hard rock, transition into punk. Uh, Also share another good metal crossover with Ross the Boss, who then was in, oh, what was Ross the Boss in? He was the league. Oh, I got to look it up because
Well, I was while you're looking up, I was aware that Mendoza especially had a punk connection, and he talked about that in that interview. And if you listen to early Twisted Sister, the musically it is a bit kind of punk-ish in that it's power chords on eighth notes, and it's not complicated. And
well, they're all New York City or Long Island guys, right? Like so. It's all, and which, so you'd have Kiss, Twisted Sister, New York
but
Dolls, or
Kiss didn't
all.
have that punk style in their music
No,
though.
but they all came from the same neighborhoods and were using the same practice spaces, and they all. Uh, and back then, in whatever 1969 or 70, we didn't really have these distinctions, right? These genres weren't like calcified like they are now. So, but they all were sharing the same practice space. They all ran in the same circles, all those bands. That's why you have, so Ross the Boss, after the Dictators, or in between stints in the Dictators, was in Manowar.
Which many people have probably heard of Manowar. I've never
Yeah.
heard of Ross the Boss or the Dictators,
He
but
was the
Manowar,
guitarist in Manowar. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, so that you could Kiss, Ramones, New York Dolls, Dictators, Twisted Sister, they were all running in the same circles in the late 60s New York City rock scene and Long Island.
And Sebastian Bach is from Canada, going to do,
And substantially younger, right? Really?
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
he's in his like late 50s, probably, I think.
Yeah. These guys
And
were
so now
talking starting to Kiss 75, 80 even.
well, and I think the Twisted Sister guys are like late 60s, so I think they're probably 10 years older than Bach. But so now we've got a Canadian, rock crooner almost, rock screamer, shall we say, doing nouveau nouveau punk descendant music, Twisted Sister, in favor of the original lead singer, who can sing perfectly well but can't move well apparently. So we'll see how it goes. They
I
couldn't
do
just
love
put
Dee
some other
Snyder.
they couldn't just put some unknown dude up there. It would never work with that.
No, you can't do the like contest winner thing like that Journey in Boston did, really. With
That guy is getting in massive amounts of controversy too. Arnel
the Journey
Pineda.
guy.
Well, it's because they're auto tuning everything.
Yeah, yeah, I did read that. And the Boston guy just died that won the
No, well,
fan
no,
contest.
that was the Brad Delp committed suicide years ago, and so the guy who died was the follow on. Who
Yeah,
was
it was the
contest
guy who won
winner.
the fan contest to take over the gig. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're into second generation deaths on Boston lead singers. Um, Manowar have some of the greatest bad metal album covers of all time.
I don't think I could. I don't have a Manowar album cover in my head.
Well, these are ones that went down to the local high school theater's costume room and got like the old Viking or cavemen outfits and basically just mixed and matched and then had the photographer come snap the photo.
Sort of what death metal became.
Yeah, but this is like costume level, like not even well done. Long way
Just
from Guar.
it's like that's what I was exactly thinking was Gore. So it's like the
Another
high
dead lead
school
singer.
the high school musical version of Gore. Goodness.
All's Guar. The funny thing about Guar is all Guar was Virginia Commonwealth University, VCU, which is a big art college. Art damage kids that basically just met at VCU, and then they created that thing. I think they call it the pit, where they design, where they created the whole myth and built the costumes and the sets and so on and so forth. It was basically just all VCU art kids.
Who knew that Guar was VCU art kids? You got me on that one finally.
Yeah, there you
My
go.
goodness, I would never would have guessed that.
I think they called it. I'm pretty sure they called it the pit, where they basically had their like studio where they built everything.
See, we taught you something. We taught you guys something out there. Now you
Richmond.
know the origins of Guar.
I went to a metal panel. I think it was a metal panel at the College Music Journal convention. College Music Journal was an industry magazine for college radio, and so as a college radio programmer, I would go, and it was in New York City. I think at the like some big hotel, like Waldorf Astoria, like, which I always thought was kind of weird. All these like, nation worth of dirty college radio programmers to take over. And it was a metal panel, and Humongous or whatever, Guar, the lead singer, RIP, was one of the panelists in full Guar regalia. And he just took over the panel. He was smashing people's water glasses with his mic stand. It was an amazing performance art.
Everybody, by the way, say hello to our third cast member, Kobe, who is now sitting here right in front of me, just waiting to chime in as he feels appropriate. He's very tired, so he's going to be irritated that I got him up so we can record the show.
Well, he's been quiet so far.
Well, he was in another room. He just wandered back in here, actually, just a second ago. So, all right.
Well, we're going from fake dungeons of terror to possibly real dungeons of terror as we move into this NFL story with Giants minority owner Steve Tisch and his Epstein fallout and whatnot. And this week, you'll probably have better control of the details, but this week, Tish's and the Giants are petitioning or looking for permission from the NFL to basically put his financial stake in the team into do-gooder children,
Yes.
children's safety of some kind. But then he retains all of his governance powers. I'm very confused about this.
Yeah. Okay. I can explain this. And I think we're getting a little feedback on your mic now because you're so close, Chris.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, Front Office Sports has this story. Steve Tisch passing Giant stake to children, but will still chair board by Ben Horney, Horney, dated March 11, 2026. So back in Giants history, the Mara family was the one who originally owned the Giants. And then they sold a 50% stake in the team to the Tisch family. Mara is still in Mara. This is now the son. These are all the sons of the original people.
Yeah, we're all second generation here.
Yes, and it's about to be third generation. And so Mara is the designated owner by the NFL. So the NFL says every team has to have only one designated owner, which is also partly, by the way, why they don't want corporate ownership, like major corporate ownership of teams. And so now Tisch, when I say Tisch, we're talking about Steve Tisch, who is the chairman of the board of the Giants and an executive vice president, but not the designated owner. He is all over the Epstein files, as we mentioned before. And this story I read has some of it. I'm going to read some of it just because it's gross and, we have to. So this is a quote out of the story. Some of the emails appeared to discuss Epstein connecting Tisch with women. There were also emails from women to Epstein reporting back about their encounters they supposedly had with Tisch. Tisch appears in the Epstein files more than 400 times, including one exchange between the two men in May of 2023 when Epstein wrote, "I can invite the Russian," in parentheses, meaning redacted name, "to meet if you like," with Tisch responding, "Is she fun?" In another set of emails, Tisch said to Epstein, "Is my present in New York City?" Epstein responded, "Yes." Tisch then asked, "Can I get my surprise to take me to lunch tomorrow?" So Epstein was brokering women for Tisch, um, apparently adult women, but it's still Epstein doing it. So as a result of that, what Tisch now it's not just Steve Tisch who owns it. It's Steve Tisch and two siblings. Okay, and so and the siblings appear to not be too involved. The siblings have one of them at least has a role in the front office, but it's Tisch that's the chairman of the board. So what all three of the siblings have asked um, for permission to do is to transfer their ownership stakes to their children, meaning the third generation. And so that will have the impact of getting Tisch out of the ownership of it. But weirdly, as you mentioned, Steve Tisch will still be the chairman of the board. I can't imagine why the NFL would want that. But this is probably an ego thing with Steve Tisch. He's got to be important and got to matter. And so he's going to, but if it were me, I would, if I was the NFL, part of my requirements for this would be Steve Tisch has got to go and got to be gone completely.
It seems like the exact opposite of what the NFL would want. The NFL cares less about who retains the money, really, or like if you created some shell games, to make sure that some of that money holding or whatever. But like the not basically taking your name away from the responsibilities of running the franchise seems like wouldn't that be the first thing if I'm the NFL I'm negotiating here? That's just really weird to me.
I don't know if I would care who owns the team as long as you're out of management. Yeah, it
right.
seems like the exact opposite. Yes. Oh, and by the way, I meant to mention just from a structural standpoint, Mara and Tisch, the Mara family and the Tisch family both recently sold 10% of the team to the Koch family with Julia Koch, which I don't know what her relationship to the Koch brothers is.
I think it's a wife.
Wife. Okay. And so the Koch family in some capacity owns 10%, which means Mara family owns 45, Tisch family owns 45, and then the Tisch structure is broken up between Steve Tisch and these two other siblings. But yeah, it seems to like the exact and complete and total opposite of what would actually be good. The best thing would be to say, Tisch, you're totally out completely. Sell everything, get gone, be gone. But if you had to choose, I would choose you getting out of management more than I would choose you need to sell your minority shareholder in stake to your children.
That's right, or his siblings, right? Because that's his co-owner. Those are the co-owners right now.
Yeah, I don't know why the siblings have to go. I mean, the siblings aren't connected to this.
Yeah, this is really weird. Like, I would almost transfer over all of your shares or stakes or whatever to your siblings, and so the entire family holdings have now iced you out of that and take you off of all responsibilities. Like, and the NFL has been conspicuously quiet on this, right? They have not weighed in. So now, do they want this association? Of course not, right? But they also are hiding behind the shield to a large degree here, and imagine negotiating pretty hard on the back end, right? So the fact that we're even hearing about the contours of a deal, about what's going to happen here, and the request from Steve Tisch here on, hey, this is how we're thinking about handling it. This means that there's already been lots of back and forth.
Yeah, people need to understand something. The Mara family and the New York Giants are one of the most influential franchises in the NFL. It's old. It's the ownership's been there for multiple generations. They are one of the most influential franchises in the NFL. And so these are the people who are normally driving things like getting other owners out. It's normally Mara and Tisch who are doing that. Okay.
And so the Maras have a reputation as the, moral center of the league.
Yes, correct. And so in this case, the rest of it may be possible. I'm speculating here that the rest of the NFL doesn't quite have the chutzpah, for lack of a better adjective, or a term, to get them out completely. So this might be the compromise somehow. You can't make any more money from this, but we'll let you have your chairmanship as long as Mara is still the one that speaks for the team in terms of NFL officially designated owner. This may be as far as they could go because it's. I was trying to think of a decent example. I mean, it's sort of like the kids trying to run dad out of the house when dad owns a house. It's something along those lines in terms of how the NFL's relationship with the Giants. So that's probably why.
Yeah,
And the truth is that this Tisch stuff and the Epstein files is gross and ugly and all that. We all agree, but there isn't any allegations of Tisch with underage women, which would be a whole nother level of problem.
yeah, I don't think this is my guess is this is not the final deal, so to speak, right? Like I because this is them requesting this of the NFL. Now, if we do agree that it's basically already been all pre-negotiated, then the NFL will accept that and we'll move on. But I suspect we may not have seen the last. I also wonder if it's stalling for a sale, right? And I wonder if there's pressure by, I guess, the Cokes and the Maras to have the Tishes eventually, like
Maybe
just sell their shares. Which, quite frankly, if you're the Tishes, you want if you're the rest of the Tisch family, this is
you
a
want to
good
cash
time.
in.
Yeah, this is a good time, right? Because who knows what further hits your family reputation is going to take. And, considering that 1% of the Miami Dolphins just sold based on a $12
No,
billion
no, 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 not
valuation.
1%, 10%.
Was it
It,
10%?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
But
So
the
anyway,
valuation was 12.5
the twelve
million
percent, yeah,
billion.
that's the headline.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if that's what the others, the Maras, the NFL would love to see here eventually. And if I was one of those siblings, cousins, nieces, nephews, aunts, uncles in that Tish world, I'd be like, yeah, maybe it's time to cash this in.
Yeah, except there may be an ego associated with owning part of the Giants, for all of them. So, okay, so there's three current Tish siblings, meaning Steve and a sister and a brother. Um, One of the sister, let's see, Steve Tish has five children. One is deceased. Um, One of the other, the sister has two children, and then looks like there's one other daughter somewhere. So you're talking about three ownership interests passing to what, seven people. So yeah, I mean, meaning that all those shares will be diluted in terms of ownership interest. You're talking about splitting up 45%, six ways, and so they're all going to have you know less than 10% each. So it's my so I would sell. I would definitely 100% sell if it were me.
And I'm sure if the NFL was hitting their magic buttons, that would be their
Yeah,
preference,
get the Epstein adjacent dude and his family out.
right?
Right.
And as we said, they're the second tier name in that reputation. So like if
But they are
Mara's
more of a that but they are far more of a name than any other minority shareholder in the NFL. Mara Tish,
yeah, yeah, yeah. They've been seen as a
a
since the
duo.
merger or whatever you call it. They are definitely seen as a pair.
Yes. Yes. So I do think this story is probably not over because the Epstein stuff just generally won't go away. Yeah, I mean the problem with the Epstein stuff is now that however many millions of pages have been released, what we think is most, but some of the pages have been withheld by courts and whatnot. But there's a lot of names redacted, but millions of pages, no one person can go through them all and adequately summarize millions and millions of pages. So it has the whole Epstein thing has the potential of dragging on and on and on and on and on forever. But the real problem is you can take a lot of things out of context, when you're talking about isolated incidents in millions of pages. And so my point with saying all this is that I think the Epstein issue generally has the potential of lingering around for years, years with stuff coming out that nobody saw out of millions of pages.
Right, which is why the NFL and want some kind of
Yeah, get out.
firewall sooner than later.
Right. Yeah, get out.
So we'll see. This is not the last of this story by any stretch. I'm talking
Like
the
just
Tish
like
one
generally from a
specifically.
morality standpoint, what is wrong with these people? You're gonna be a rich guy in New York City, and you have to get some rich guy scumbag in Miami to broker young model type women for you. I mean, that's crazy, and I don't know if that's just narcissism in the billionaire class or what, but that's nuts. Just generally, that's nuts, I think.
They live by a different set of laws, rules,
And
morals,
values, apparently.
and
Yeah.
values than the rest of the world. That's that's why the
Yeah.
1% narrative works.
Yeah. Right. And it's just all of it's gross. And, even if these women were adults and of age, it doesn't matter. It's still just disgusting. And yeah, I just don't like you can't relate to that. I can't relate to that. 99.999% of the people cannot relate to the conduct in even legal conduct that is uh, you know, alleged in these Epstein files and how he and these people live. I just can't relate to it.
No. Um, so we'll continue to see that drama play out. The slow moving drama that is college athletics.
Very
Um,
slow.
Kind of a low boil, let's call it. But that doesn't mean the frog isn't dying. Um, we're starting to see that even the rule systems that are put in place to handle, basically the fallout from the House ruling, House being a name, not a governing body. And what is it now, Steve? So we basically are seeing that the rules are being pushed and that the system to manage essentially the caps and the spending rules are having a hard time continuing to deal with the kind of side door money that always seems to exist no matter what the governance of college sports has in place.
Yeah. Uh, all right. So there's multiple different stories on this. We'll start with CNBC. Um, we'll start with the president. Trump vows to fix executive. Trump vow. This is the name of a story from CNBC. Trump vows executive order to fix college sports NIL payments mess by Dan Morgan, dated March 6th. The one story we found for our aborted show from last week. And so, what has happened here is the president was at some sort of roundtable on collegiate sports at the White House. And this included a bunch of names you've heard: Nick Saban, who's a kind of a Trump guy, NCAA President Charlie Baker, Ron DeSantis, who's the governor of Florida, House Speaker Mike Johnson. There's some others, no student athletes at all. And so the headline out of this was that president says, one, it, college sports is a mess. I think we can all agree on that. College sports is a mess created by NFL, NIL payments to football and basketball players, and the House settlement. And Chris mentioned that before. That's for those of you who have missed prior shows. House v. NCAA was a case, a very complicated settlement. So the money quote from the president was, "I will have an executive order within 1 week. Um, if this doesn't work, college sports will be destroyed. Women's sports will be destroyed." That's the quote. Now it's been a week and there is no executive order. First of all, um, been more than a week. I just can't fathom. I don't pretend to be the foremost expert on federal rules and federal law, but I cannot fathom what authority the president would have to issue an executive order that would fix any of this, because the NCAA is not, the NCAA is a private organization. And these rules are mostly, the House settlement is a court settlement, and a lot of these rules are driven by state law, not federal law. I can't imagine what the president. I think this is the president just mouthing off at as he's wont to do, talk and say the first thing that comes to his head, rather than something that's reality. And he also, by the way, the other quote in here was, he knows there would be a lawsuit filed about it. So my thought is this is just a bunch of blather, basically, from the president. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I can't disagree. I'd say this whatever roundtable summit, meeting.
So the roundtable name was the Saving College Sports Roundtable. So that's it.
There you
Go
go.
ahead.
So that was probably scheduled and planned, what, 5 months ago, 6 months ago,
Yeah, something
something
like
in the
that. Yeah.
past. So now it pops up on the calendar at an inopportune time because obviously the federal government has more things to worry about on multiple fronts than college athletics. So, but they're not going to cancel it. So they go ahead and have it. And yeah, I agree. He has to feel like he has to say something that feels, forward momentum or
Right.
declarative out of the meeting. And then, but the whole thing is how do you get Nick Saban to sit around at the White House basically and opine? Although I do think Nick Saban has his ear on this.
Saban does. Saban is
Yeah,
friends with Trump somehow.
yeah, I actually think so. I think anything we see on this front is just a whisper campaign from Nick Saban. I think that's clear as day. I don't see how. Well, I mean, we can debate, and believe me, it's been debated from all political sides, the effectiveness of an executive order and how much sticking power they have, especially now where we just get one group comes in, writes their executive orders, and the next group comes
It's
in
been
and
happening
undoes.
since the Obama administration,
It's
basically every president, and even
yeah,
before that.
yeah, before. So, right. So that's what I'm saying. So that's just political badminton, right, to a large degree. But now they're even less important because now it's even easier to strip what was dubious to begin with. So that would never hold here anyway. And this is
What
really
exactly
so
is he-
complex.
What exactly is the executive order going to do? Even assuming, let's pretend for the sake of the hypothetical that the president would have legal authority to do something, which I don't think he does. What would he do to fix it?
Yeah, I don't know. Like that's a great point because other executive orders that are not about athletics or whatever, you at least say, hey, we are telling this federal agency to do this.
Well, I'll give you an example. You may not agree with it, and that's not the point. The president, and I recently read this for a legal reason. The president issued an order on gender ideology in the government. My point is not to debate that. We're not here for that. But the president basically said, this is how the federal government will treat gender ideology, right? That's something that the president could do. He can dictate to his departments, this is how I want to treat.
Yeah, how the executive branch will be run. Yeah.
Right. Which is fair enough. And again, that's a debate for another show. But in this case, what we're talking about is the president issuing an order, an executive order that does something that affects a private organization, massive private organization through executive fiat. And I don't understand what he possibly thinks he could possibly do.
No,
I think even if you could dream something, what would he dream up? He would dream up, if he was a monarch and could dream up something, what would you do? You would dream up some sort of limits on the type and amounts of deals you could do with athletes, and some sort of approval process, and you would dream up some sort of limitation on who could do it, I guess, right? Probably realistically.
I guess, but even we can't listen. Steve and I can come up with all kinds of hypotheticals that at least sound good on all kinds of topics.
Yeah.
Even just trying to find one that you could say, I guess this would be the logic or the intent of the executive orders is very difficult because all the things Steve said, you're talking about states, you're talking about private companies, you're talking about an entire ecosystem, both legal and illegal and in between, that has operated for 60 years. I mean, so there are all kinds of market, legal, ownership, jurisdiction issues, which is why this is a hard thing to solve in general. So I don't think there is no single solution to this at this point. So you almost have to deal with the complexity of which an executive order, whatever we could come up with, would not be negotiating that complexity.
Right. So however you feel about the president, good, bad, approval, disapprove, Republican, Democrat, the point is we don't think that this executive order will ultimately solve anything. Number one. And number two, Trump's right. It's going to be in court immediately. A lot of these executive orders he's issuing have been in court. And what has tended to happen is that the people who are opposing the orders pick and choose venues, obviously, that are more leaning anti-Trump. And so then a lot of these executive orders have been stayed nationally, and then an appellate court gets a hold of it and releases the stay. That tends to be what happens in all these orders, but a lot of them haven't been seen by the Supreme Court yet, and so it's just sort of tying up stuff. And this one would be tied up immediately.
And sometimes that's the purpose of an executive order, is actually to pick a legal fight. You know you're going to get sued, and you think you probably have a case to make on two branches of government. But I think anyone would know this one, whatever came out of this, which, by the way, to your point, we haven't seen anything. So it's not like we're past the deadline.
The deadline came and gone.
Yeah, we're not even talking about a real executive order, right? Where we could say, okay, this, that, and the other thing about it. But I don't think anyone would think that it would hold up in any kind of court, especially when the court basically has been pretty declarative here, which is the reason why we're seeing the scramble in the rules, regulation, and finances of college
So
sports.
if you want me to dream up anything that is even an approaching reality, you would have to say, okay, have the Department of Justice dream up some sort of legal basis for why or why not college sports collectives can or can't pay college athletes in the way they are. So, meaning that call it some sort of breach of federal law, and then you issue an executive order that says, you know, you know, we're going to order some federal commission, federal body, federal department, order the Justice Department to monitor this and how to get around this hypothetical crime. Here's what they have to do. I mean, I guess that's what, but none of this, like we said, it's all ridiculous. And this is just the president feeling like he has to say something because of this college sports roundup. And by the way, so they brought up the SCORE Act, which is in fact realistic because that is a bill pending before Congress. And the Speaker of the House, Johnson, said the Republicans, this is a quote, Republicans would continue efforts to pass the SCORE Act, which would preempt state regulation of name, image, and likeness. That's the only realistic thing the government could do is pass the SCORE Act that would impact this.
If he truly cared about the issue, he would use executive bully pulpit and influence to whip the vote
Correct.
for the SCORE Act in Congress.
That's realistic.
Yeah, that would be
with it or disagree with it, but that is realistic.
That would be the more effective political path.
That is correct. And that I suspect Donald Trump, again, if you love him or hate him, we're not here to debate that. It's a different show, but he says a lot of things off the top of his head. He has no filter at all. If for those of you who haven't noticed, and which would be zero people, you don't haven't noticed this. And so a lot of the stuff he spouts off, he's not serious about. He's not serious about Canada as the 51st state. He's not serious about taking over Greenland, nor is he serious about issuing an executive order to fix all of college sports. Okay. The SCORE Act is the only realistic thing that's on the table that the government could do that would have any impact on this whatsoever.
Yeah, totally. Now, also, I'm not really digging the president.
Bubby's very upset about
the state of college athletics. One thing, and I'm only kind of building off this because the president said it, not necessarily a commentary on the speaker, but people keep talking about how college sports is going to be ruined, right? Now, listen, I actually tend to agree that none of this is good.
The road to ruination already, personally.
Maybe, probably, yes. Maybe we're heading towards a cliff. Who knows when the cliff's going to come? But what I do know is that the business of these things is booming. Like, yes, all of the ratings and financial things in college football have been through the roof now, multi-year. And Steve, they just came out and announced, I'm going to get some of these details right, and I don't have it right in front of me, but ESPN, they just released the ratings across 900 ESPN platforms that show college basketball games, and they're hitting 15-year ratings high. So college, and I think this was specifically men's, if I remember correctly. So men's college basketball on ESPN hit a 15-year high in ratings. So it's like this. Now we can debate bubble burst, all of that, but maybe you could make an argument that the runaway success of the finances of college athletics and the TV deals and the media and the interest and the ratings is just pushing a bubble, right? It is the bubble. But, this does not seem to be affecting the audience, the business, or even the, level of play on the courts and fields. It's just really strange. It to me is a classic bubble scenario.
Well, yeah, and one with given the amount of other choices people now have in viewing options, one would think naturally that ratings would be diluted, which is the opposite of what's happened. So
no, it's crazy.
Yeah, it is. It's crazy. Okay, so that's the politics of it. So we do have another story here related to this. This is from Front Office Sports. This is the memo, kids, that we tell you to do. This is called College Sports Commission says NIL Go system under strain. by Amanda Kristovich, dated March 10th. Okay, so the College Sports Commission. College Sports Commission is a body that hypothetically has to approve all these NIL deals. So, you get the star setter from the Iowa State, volleyball team who gets a deal from the local car dealership. Theoretically, that deal will have to go to the College Sports Commission. Okay. And so what the story here is basically saying is the understrain part is that there are now so many of these that the board itself is having trouble logistically keeping up with it all. That's the story here. And it says they've approved $166.5 million worth of NIL deals since launching last June, which frankly, I'm surprised it's not way more than that. But that is the strain part. Whatever logistical setup this commission has, apparently they're not ready to deal with the explosion of these basically legal bribes. Because what this has happened here, in case you haven't heard all of our other shows, local boosters, in many cases under the guise of local collectives, will come up with contracts which may or may not be all that valid for high school students and college students to get, if they will only donate their athletic time to the local university. And so these deals have to go to this College Sports Commission to theoretically prove that this isn't what I just called it as a bribe. And so the story here is that there's so many of them that they just can't keep up with them. It's a nice thought, but I don't trust the NCAA in any way to keep up with this at all. I think it's more farce than anything. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, they're quickly building, structures around to contain a runaway train. So, I think they're going to smash through whatever kind of weak sauce rules and regulations.
It's putting a chain link fence up in front of a moving train. Yes.
Yeah. So now, what I find interesting, to me, the story is that you can't. It's very difficult to stay close to, not get ahead of, close to or parity with the cheaters. And so the financial ecosystem of college sports basically has remained the same for 60 plus years. And that is, there are pools of money that attract players to the school. Now, through most of anybody that's even remotely close in age to we are, so I'd actually say anybody that's like 30 and older understands the world where there'd be a scandal and some coach and this would get busted or whatever, right? But there was this ecosystem always existed. NIL then gave a path to legitimacy, and that's what we saw then. So these kind of like backdoor collectives, gray black market collectives, all of the ecosystem that was already pumping tons of money into the system, into players, and on the behalf, wink, wink, of a university, had paths of legitimacy. Now we're trying to put regulations or whatever kind of weak sauce rules around that, and we see the real power and money just find the in-between spots, the gray areas, to continue to exist and do what they've done. Because what the article says is basically it's the strain of these kind of sidebar deals that are basically end arounds of the system that they're having a hard time being able to regulate and mandate. So we're always dealing with the side money. It just where and how the side money organizes itself has been what's changed over 60 years, not that it exists.
Anybody who's our age will remember the best example of this, which is Brian Bosworth when he was a student at the University of Oklahoma in Sports Illustrated posing in front of his Corvette. You remember that photo?
Yeah, of course.
and the note that the quote from the Sports Illustrated article about it, because I've been a subscriber to Sports Illustrated since that time, was, side note to NCAA, he bought it, as if implying that this college student could afford a Corvette, and he just also so happened to be a star college football player, and it's not connected in any way. Trust me. Brian Bosworth was a saint and an angel. So this kind of stuff's been going on, and yes, and it's been legalized, and theoretically, this commission is a decent idea to sort of weed out the corruption. But the truth is, they're not weeding out anything. and they're just legitimizing the corruption, and they're probably looking the other way because these collectives and these entities that are forming, or what's happening here is they're communicating with the schools, okay, and the coaches, okay, we want this star quarterback from this high school in Atlanta. How do we get him? So let's get a deal together, and they get the collective to get a deal put together. And the deals aren't, by the way, he's got a star, you do commercials. It's most of these deals are you make social media posts. That's what most of these marketing deals are, which are nothing, for the most part. And so this is, the whole thing is just awful. And I gotta say again, which is what we said, only the NCAA opened up the transfer portal simultaneously, allowing people to transfer every single year with this. So it's where we've ended up with is permanent free agency, professional football with permanent free agency for all and no contracts. One of these solutions, if you want the government to broker a solution, not that Trump could dictate this, but a great solution would be there's a contract. And if you show up and if you take one of these deals, then you have to stay at the school for 3 years. Okay. That would go a long way towards eliminating a lot of the corruption, but nobody seems to figure that out.
And we've even seen a few court cases that are looking where the team is basically suing players that leave or threatening players that leave, with their legal argument being that whatever deal was in place is enough of a contract, right? So they're even trying before they have contracts in place.
Yeah, there is. The name is escaping me right now, but there is a lawsuit going on right now about exactly that for some quarterback somewhere. I can't remember who it is.
Indiana, maybe?
I don't think it's Indiana.
No, that's in my head because that #1 draft pick.
Yeah, no,
I can't remember the school either.
But anyway, the point is there are lawsuits about it, and so the NCAA could fix all this by limiting the transfer portal and then requiring contracts, saying if you accept a scholarship at the university, except for conduct and performance issues, the player cannot terminate for 3 years. Even 2 years would be at least better, but 3 years ideally, because that would keep the player in place. Because listen, we at the Hog side, we do these draft analysis every year, and I'm like all over the salary caps. All these players nowadays have gone to at least 2 universities, in some cases 3, and because they're buying their way through all these NIL deals. So, okay, so I think that is the gist of this story, and the other part of it, again, is that there's so many of them they're having trouble keeping up with it, and that was kind of the fundamental basis of the front office sports story. All right, I thought we had one other college football thing, but I guess we didn't.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, that was it. Okay.
Yeah. All right. So, Steve, are you planning on canceling? I know you're getting your rebates on your trip to Saudi Arabia to watch F1 racing. So, how are your refunds going?
Listen, I had a big vacation set up to Saudi. To Riyadh, now we're going to cancel it. What Chris is making fun of is the fact that F1 has canceled the Bahrain and Saudi Arabia F1 races because of the combat situation in Iran. This is who is the story for this? This ESPN.
Yep.
And I just closed out of it. Here we go. F1, and the name of the story is F1 set to cancel Bahrain Saudi Arabia races amid Iran war sources, by Nate Saunders, dated March 13, 2026. This is pretty obvious. There's and again, we're not here to debate the war, and that's another podcast, but the fact of the matter is there is combat in the Middle East, and Iran is launching ballistic missiles and drones all over the Middle East. And so what F1 is afraid of is that one of these shots, whether by error or by mistake, ends up taking out F1 people. They don't want to endanger their staff for the sake of a race. And so they're not rescheduling these. These are canceled. And so the F1 season will now be 22 races, not 24. This is definitely the smart thing to do. Again, however you feel about it, about the war, which is another show, I don't think you want to put any of these people in danger. That'd be really dumb. So this is a smart thing. I don't know why we have an F1 race in Riyadh at all, except for the fact that the
Well,
Saudi
because they pay
investment
for it.
fund,
Yeah.
yes, the Saudi investment fund, which is really just the royal family's, slush fund, is invested in all kinds of stuff that nobody even realizes. But that's why. But it's the last place I think you got to hold an F1 race, just generally.
Yeah, I mean, well, it'd be an interesting obstacle, because one thing that makes F1 a little different than oval track things, right? Is that they go through landscapes, right? Like it's kind of the tracks are embedded into different landscapes, whether they be urban or outside of town or whatever. So it would be an interesting obstacle for F1 race, right? But
Yeah.
and it's also not just the race; it's the infrastructure. I mean, you do those things to make money. You do those things to promote, right? You want people, you want people traveling, right? So it's a whole infrastructure around like
Have it
pulling
in
off those
Hawaii.
events.
Don't have it in, Saudi Arabia. How
Yeah,
about that?
well, the other thing that got canceled, no, excuse me, moved. So this one was moved, not canceled. Was the upcoming flag football tournament, which I think is going to include a bunch of NFL players. It's Tom Brady. I think it's going to have the involvement of the whatever the U.S. team for the Olympics looks like in just a couple of weeks, and they moved from Riyadh to L.A. And I think the date is coming up. I mean, I think it's still within March. I think it all kicks off, I think, towards the end of the month. The March 18th, they're actually doing a big, dog and pony show about picking the NFL players and picking the team. So it's a whole extravagant event. So there's another thing that obviously moved. That one was a little bit more immediate because it was happening in weeks. These F1 races were a little bit off in the distance. So all that money, right? Like because we see, we talked about the Saudi wealth fund and other Middle East money, and whether it's golf,
Saudi
whether it's
Investment Fund, I think is the
yeah,
name of it. Yeah.
F1, whether it's minority ownership in various sports teams and leagues, whether it's they've been in sports and entertainment. There was a big brouhaha about the Riyadh Comedy Festival and who went to that, right? So that they're doing this stuff. So it really they did all of that in a world where you had stability and peace globally and in the region. This is going at especially depending on the course of the war and the fallout for the war. It's going to be really interesting to see how much this shakes all this Saudi investment money in sports and entertainment. And what happens there? And do they pull out? Do they, so you're about to see what are unintended or fallout consequences for so much of the, let's just call it broadly, the entertainment industry, which I'm including sports in this statement. If we see a bunch of fallout that Saudi money pulls out, is no longer valid, so on and so forth, it's going to be interesting.
Can you imagine a comedy festival in a fundamentalist Muslim country? How does that work exactly? I mean, it just as a humorous aside, what on earth is that? Because they're not going to be able to tell all the normal jokes and do all the normal things that American comedians would do.
No, they got leaked what the directives were about what you could talk about.
Oh, I
That
hadn't seen
that
that.
yeah, it
So
got leaked. Yeah.
it's
Um,
probably very, very limited, obviously.
yeah. Um,
Look, here's the big picture on all this. Okay, I don't really care where an F1 race at. And by the way, the dates in the F1 races were April 12th in
Actually, they
Bahrain,
weren't that far off. Yeah.
and Saudi one is April 19th. And who knows, it maybe all be over by then or whatever. But point is, the
It'd be too
races
late
are,
to reboot them for
the
that.
races are over. Right. But the big picture here is that I think the presence of the Saudi wealth fund in some of these sports is causing problems. Okay. Because um, you know, fundamentalist Muslim values of the world. Oh, I have nothing against Islam. Don't get me wrong with this, okay? But when you're imposing royal family, Saudi royal family values on American industries, it's presenting limitations and restrictions that I think are not in keeping with a free market economy. Okay, because Saudi Arabia, for those of you who don't know, is a very, very, very fundamentalist country. they've been an ally of the U.S. in various capacities and levels for a generation, but they are the most fundamentalist country in the Middle East. And so if you have those limitations, for example, a comedy festival, that's not good. And having I think people have a point when they question whether or not you want the Saudi investment fund involved, given their treatment of women, because their belief system for women are dramatically different than what we believe in here in America. And I think the big picture is not F1 race. The big picture is, do we want Saudi Arabian royal family values in American sports entertainment? That to me is the issue. To me, I would say no.
I mean, in a status quo world, this has been kind of back channel. We've talked about it. That's obviously out there. Even something like golf, where it was a little bit more like in the news. But these things are happening in the background. They're happening in deals. You can, you kind of pave over it, in a lot of ways. And it's just money doing money things. Why do I care what somebody's money believes in necessarily, right? But you get into something like this where you have a whole whole bouquet of issues, problems, connections, conflicts, broadly defined. And these things come to the front channel, right? It's not back channel anymore, because now, now all of the fault lines on where people are just rushing into these deals and these relationships, well, those were tenuous at best. So you see the fault lines pretty quick when there's any kind of pressure test.
Yes. And again, to me, it's, do we want to accept those sort of rabidly fundamentalist values being artificially imposed on our culture? And to their credit, like Live Golf hasn't been. Okay, Live Golf is basically, and they've kind of sidelined the Saudi investment fund as best they can, and they're televising the events and whatnot. But on the other hand, then you have like the comedy festival, which, yeah, they're restricting the material of the comedians based on these fundamentalist values. And why are we sending F1 to the Middle East? I think we would be better served by limiting the involvement in this fund. I don't know how you do that and still have open market. Okay. And so that's a whole nother question, because I do believe in the free market more than anything, but I think we'd be better off without it, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, we'll see. Apparently, there's a good amount of Saudi money in the Paramount.
I think there's a lot of Saudi money and a lot of things we're not
right.
really aware of, because this is what this is. If people are wondering, so the Saudi Arabian royal family controls the oil industry in Saudi Arabia. There's not a free market. Exxon stuff, some companies have some deals in there, but it is not the private industry controlling the oil money. It is the Saudi royal family. And so this is the oil money from the Saudi royal family. And that is what this is. And so there's billions and billions and billions of dollars. And so I suspect that they're involved in a lot of things that we don't know about. And in terms of minority investments and stuff.
Yeah, totally. And if it dries up, there's going to be a lot of things that are going to be out a chunk of change.
Yes. But I think if it were me and I was running one of these industries, I would politely decline the involvement of the Saudi Royal Investment Fund, just so I don't have to deal with some of these cultural issues that I think are not useful or good for Western culture. Say it like that. I don't want to support somebody who's, imposing values on females that, I don't think are good, for example.
Yeah, I think they did. They just got the right to get a driver's license within the last 2 years, I believe.
Yeah, right. So, yeah, there's all kinds of stuff. And so, I mean, God bless them. You can have your culture, in your place, but leave us out, and I would decline if it were me.
It's going to be super fascinating. It's going to be super fascinating, but because their money is, you're right. Their money is everywhere. They've got pieces of many of the pies.
Yep. So we'll see what happens. So the F1 fans, Your season is now shorter. That's
And
the conclusion.
quite frankly, I think this is a win-win for the emergence of flag football, which I actually think is a coming phenomenon. And I think it's much better for the future of this sport to have its marquee kickoff event. What it now basically
Not
2
in
years.
Riyadh.
Yeah, in LA, where the Olympics are going to be, which is going to be basically the premiere of this event on a global stage, and is already building excitement. So, if you care about or just interested in and seeing what happens with flag football, this is sometimes you get lucky, I guess, because I think this is going to be, and it's going to be in our time zone. This is going to be way better for the forward momentum of flag football than the Riyadh tournament would have been.
I totally agree with you.
So maybe they caught a break on that one.
Yep.
All right. Well, Steve, it's probably been a fun couple weeks on the Hog side. At least there's a drip daily news stories. In fact, I just saw in the background as we're recording the show that the Commanders signed Jerome Ford. So there you go.
Oh,
a little breaking news.
I hadn't seen that one yet. Of course, it's not breaking by the time people.
No, by the time you hear this, but I'm giving Steve a tip for preparing for this week's Hog
my
side.
task this weekend is to sort through the Washington salary cap. So we'll work on that, and we'll be talking about all manner of Washington C-words, free agent moves on the Hogside podcast, which is released every Thursday, and in all of our regular written content.
I do not think Jerome Ford is going to change the needle on the salary cap issue.
No, but Odafe Owe will, and that's the one I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah, that's why we're getting the rest of some of these guys for like $1.50.
Yeah.
All right, Steve, we'll see you maybe 2 weeks, but we'll see what the news throws up.
2 weeks, hopefully.
Yes. All right. Bye.